Some estimates go as high as 40,000 years. 40,000 years! That's how long the land we know as the northeastern United States could potentially have been inhabited by indigenous peoples we know as Native Americans. Their incredibly distant ancestors crossed the Bering Land Bridge that briefly, at least in the context of our geological history, that briefly connected the continent of North America with the continent of Asia. Then, through the course of countless generations, they moved their way east through brutal winters, short summers, and the constant threat of a million different forms of life-threatening danger. Once settled among the fertile forested land of the Northeast, where hunting was abundant and crops grew exceptionally well, once they figured out, again, over the course of scores of generations, what could be grown and how to preserve the soil, communities grew as well. Loosely formed but tight-knit, dependent on each other and on the land they respected above all else, willing to fight for their survival, but otherwise leading a peaceful and decent existence in harmony with nature. In the region that today comprises southern New York State, all of New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, and northern Delaware, was, for the previous millennia, inhabited by the Lenape tribe. Speaking an Algonquin dialect from the tribes living further north, the Lenape nation's first European contact came in 1524, when Italian explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano sailed his ship into what we know today as Lower New York Bay. A contingent of Lenape representatives paddled out in a canoe with gifts of tobacco and beaver pelts. The original name of the tribe, Lenni Lenape, translates to pure, genuine, original person, with the shortened name Lenape meaning simply original. The Lenape were also the first to sign a treaty with the United States more than 200 years later, but that didn't exactly work out well for them. The Lenape were eventually forced to relinquish all their land that was supposedly protected by treaty and move west, where today they have a reservation in Oklahoma, under a different name altogether. Why? Let's dig in. Welcome back to The Devil Within. You're listening to the corpse light of Cape Henlopen. In the spring of 1610, a wealthy English nobleman named Thomas West set sail for the New World. Having outfitted 3 ships consisting of 150 men entirely at his own expense, this wasn't a voyage of discovery. It was a war party. Earlier in the year, word had reached England that the Powhatan Indians in Virginia had killed the Jamestown colony's council president, John Ratcliffe, and that sparked the First Anglo-Powhatan War. Thomas West, as the largest investor in the London Company, which was responsible for the colonial charters, was named the new governor of Virginia, and he set sail with a small army to protect his new responsibility. As the newly appointed top dog of the colony, there was a rush to exhibit a professional level of sucking up to the new boss, who arrived with a bunch of armed men. It's important to mention here that Thomas West's official name and title were Thomas West, 3rd Baron Delaware. And there, right there in his official title, is where I want to live for a minute. It's a French phrase, Delaware. War spelled with 2 R's, W-A-R-R. It's an obsolete spelling of the word war. The phrase means of the war, or member of a warring clan, which by this point, Thomas West certainly was not, as a wealthy inheritor and governor for life of Virginia. But still, money talks, and everyone wanted to keep the boss happy, so they went on a naming frenzy. They combined the syllables in his title and came up with the name Delaware, which they attributed to, well, just about everything they looked at. The bay, the land, the valley, even the people who lived there. The Lenape became the Delaware Indians that lived in the Delaware Valley along the Delaware River that emptied into the Delaware Bay in the land of Delaware. Why did they choose Delaware instead of West? Well, because life expectancy on the planet back then was about 35, maybe 40, and Thomas West was already in his mid-30s. But titles remain and get passed down to other men who would likely appreciate seeing their namesake everywhere in the New World. Basically, if titles survive through generations, so does sucking up. On Christmas Day in the year 1655, the HMS Devonshireman was approaching what we know today as Cape Henlopen, Delaware, a beautiful stretch of rolling sand dunes that delineates the Delaware side of the mouth of Delaware Bay. Poor visibility and stormy seas in the pre-dawn darkness made it a treacherous and anxious approach to the bay, and the Devonshireman's captain was desperate for some help. The crew of more than 200 must have been overjoyed when the call went out that a lighthouse had been illuminated on the shore that would guide them safely to harbor. However, within minutes, it was discovered that the light was instead leading them inexorably to their deaths. The Devonshireman was dashed upon the rocks near the shore of Cape Henlopen. Not a single sailor survived the wreck. This phantom light from the shore that lured the captain of the ship to drive his three-masted frigate directly into the treacherous rocks that have claimed many a ship before and since is what sailors commonly refer to as a corpse light, or more affectionately, a will-o'-the-wisp. The Latin name for it is ignis fatuus, or foolish flame, effectively an evil lure that promises deliverance but delivers death instead. But when did this start, and why Cape Henlopen? The answer, some say, can be traced back to Thomas West and his army that arrived to fight the native tribes of Virginia and the surrounding area. In the spring of 1655, 2 generations after the death of the 3rd Baron Delaware, a fragile peace had been established between the Lenape and the colonists. Yes, there were sporadic bouts of violence, but for the most part, everyone left each other alone. But on one particular day, nestled among a Lenape village of no great consequence, there was to be a wedding. Lenape weddings were a simple affair, consisting of, after a brief courtship, a representative of the groom would approach the family of the bride and offer marriage. The representative would then retreat back to his normal life, his job being done. The groom's family would await answer from a representative of the bride's family. If the proposal was accepted, a dowry of sorts from the bride's family was delivered to the home of the groom's family, and everyone would meet up later on near the sacred fire. Sometimes a smudge ceremony would occur. Smudging involves the burning of sacred herbs and allowing the smoke to cleanse the spirit, clear negative energy from the space, and connect with the spiritual world. Then the couple would go on what we know as a honeymoon. Seriously, they'd take off for a few days to be alone and enjoy their new marriage. Then they'd return as a new force for good within the tribe, and prayers for wellness, healthy children, peace, and happiness would be delivered from their neighbors. But on this day, there would be no happiness, no celebration, only death and destruction. For just as the sacred sage was lit to cleanse the negativity and leave only peace and love in the air, British soldiers exploded from the tree line in a sneak attack and massacred the entire village for reasons unknown. It was that winter that the first reports of the corpse light became known. Local legend has it that the elders of the Lenape Nation, upon hearing of the marriage massacre, implored their shaman to summon the darkest of curses and call for the death of all white men, beginning with those that arrived to their sacred land in what they called their great canoes. In the centuries that followed, the entry to the Delaware Bay at Cape Henlopen has claimed hundreds of ships, and many were blamed on the corpse light. But is there any truth to the legend? Any chance that a naturally occurring phenomena could be to blame and not some ancient curse? With deep roots in European folklore, the corpse light, or will-o'-the-wisp, is an atmospheric ghost light seen by travelers at night. The idea exists metaphorically in literature, both as a sign to persevere towards a lofty goal, or as a sinister siren call that portends unavoidable disaster. My favorite version of the phantom light is the Irish tale of Drunk Jack. So there was this guy named Jack who was basically just not a good guy. Drunk all the time, never went to church, stole money from people to pay for his booze, abandoned his family. You get the picture. One day, Jack is sitting in a bar when the devil himself walks in and tells Drunk Jack that his earthly existence has come to an end and it's time to pay his debts. Now, being a drunk doesn't mean you can't also be clever, and the devil wasn't prepared for just how clever Drunk Jack could be. Old Jack appealed to the devil's sense of decency and convinced him to allow himself one last drink before an eternity of torment in the fires of hell. The devil agreed. "But wait," said Jack in a sorrowful lament, "I have no more money to pay for that drink." "Mr. Devil, sir, how about if you just use your magic and turn yourself into a coin, then I can buy my drink with it, and then boom, you turn yourself back and everyone's happy. Well, except the barman. But come on." The devil didn't see any harm in the transaction, and poof, a shiny coin appeared on the bar. But instead of paying for his drink, Drunk Jack placed the coin in his pocket next to a crucifix, which prevented the devil from returning to his previous form. Presently, a deal was struck that would grant Drunk Jack 10 more years of life in exchange for the devil's release from Jack's pocket. 10 years later to the day, the devil appeared to collect his due. This time, Jack protested that his deal actually called for 20 years. What are you talking about? And the devil was 10 years early. Wary of Drunk Jack's tricks, the devil demanded proof. "Well, of course I have proof," Jack said. "I hid our contract right up in this tree here for safekeeping. Let me grab it, and I'll prove that I'm telling the truth." "Whoa, whoa, whoa," said the devil. "You're not going anywhere. I'll climb up the tree, and I'll fetch the contract. I don't trust you at all." But the moment the devil climbed the tree, Drunk Jack carved a cross in the trunk, and the devil couldn't climb down. This time, a deal was struck that completely forgave Jack's debts in exchange for the devil's release. Now, no one had any delusions that there would be a place in heaven for Drunk Jack, and the devil certainly didn't want him in hell. Knowing that Drunk Jack's fate would be to wander the realm of lost souls for eternity, the devil retrieved an ember from the fires of hell to light Jack's way through the twilight. Jack placed the ember in a hollowed-out turnip that would serve as his lantern, and would also be the source of phantom lights the world over for the rest of time. Cool story, but okay, what is it actually? I mean, if we want to say it's not really a Native American curse or some other paranormal phenomenon, which it could be, then what is it? Wikipedia tells us that science proposes that the will-o'-the-wisp phenomena, or ignis fatuus, are caused by the oxidation of phosphine, diphosphane, and methane. These compounds, which are produced by normal organic decay, can cause photon emissions. And since phosphine and diphosphane mixtures spontaneously ignite on contact with oxygen, only small quantities of it would be needed to ignite the much more abundant methane to create ephemeral or short-lived fires. Furthermore, Phosphine produces phosphorus pentoxide as a byproduct, which forms phosphoric acid upon contact with water vapor, which can explain viscous moisture sometimes described as accompanying these phantom lights. Okay, wasn't really prepared for a chemistry lesson, but I get it. It could happen naturally. There are some other naturally occurring explanations that are a little more exciting. Plate tectonics have been blamed. Earthquake lightning. Yeah, that's a thing. It occurs when rock is placed under enormous strain that causes the water trapped inside to vaporize. And rock that contains quartz or silicon that suddenly has its water content vaporized produces electricity that can be channeled up to the surface and appear as what's called earth light. Cool, huh? Scores of experiments have been conducted over the last 100 years in concentrated attempts to find, document, and even recreate these different various forms of elusive lights. The main problem was the seeming intelligent nature of these lights. Yeah, intelligent insofar as they would diminish as soon as someone drew near enough to study them. This would occur wherever on the planet these lights could be found. A researcher would discover an area that consistently produced a naturally occurring phantom light. They would approach the light source, and it would suddenly disappear. Why? A tentative conclusion was reached that the mere introduction of something that even slightly upset the fragile conditions necessary to produce the phenomenon would make it vanish. A person walking towards the light, for example, would disrupt the air surrounding it, and that would be enough. As frustrating as that is, it appears to be the case. But back to the shores of Delaware and the corpse light of Cape Henlopen. The Cape, fake lighthouse or not, was and is a very dangerous navigational area. By the mid-1700s, sailors from Philadelphia insisted that a proper lighthouse be erected, or they would no longer attempt to even navigate into Delaware Bay, a situation that would greatly impact the economic health of the region. By 1769, there was an operational lighthouse standing tall among the dunes of the Cape. It was nearly destroyed by the British during the Revolutionary War, but was repaired and relit in 1784. For the next 100 years, the tides and winds did their thing, and most of the great dune upon which the lighthouse rested had been lost to erosion. An incredible amount of vegetation was planted in an effort to halt the steady progress of the sea, but it was ultimately futile. In April of 1926, the old lighthouse lost its battle with Mother Nature and collapsed into the Atlantic. By then, a more permanent structure had been built farther inland and away from the ravages of wind and water. Today, there is no lighthouse on Cape Henlopen, but still, sightings of a ghostly light persist. And further, there are numerous accounts of the British ship the Devonshireman appearing as a seafaring specter, hopelessly following the guiding hand of a ghostly light that wants nothing but death and destruction. The belief is that the Lenape curse was so strong that the ship and her crew are doomed to relive the terrible sinking over and over for eternity. If you happen to be visiting the Cape, you just may get to witness it. Thanks for listening to The Devil Within. Be sure to be following us wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. You could also check out our socials at The Devil Within Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Until next time, stay safe out there.